It's the early hours of the morning, the 5:54 a.m., the 3rd of October, 2025, and I'll be going out soon for some newspapers. It would be remiss of me not to talk a little bit about the breaking news in the last few hours, which is about the terrorist attack in Manchester at a Jewish synagogue. Now, as always with these things, it's important to be cautious and not just throw out lots of pontificate on a lot of issues as the story is ongoing. But I'm going to read out a bit from the Wikipedia article on this, what we know so far, and then my thoughts on it. It goes without saying I condemn it. I condemn all acts of terrorism, and it is troubling. This will be the first terrorist attack in the UK for a few years now, that is designated as a terrorist attack. I think the last one was the Reading attack in 2020, if I've got that right. So it's a concerning development. I'm talking about attacks involving loss of life. So this is from the Wikipedia article. 2025 Manchester Synagogue attack. The Manchester Synagogue attack was an Islamic terrorist attack that occurred on the 2nd of October 2025 during the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, when a British man of Syrian descent drove a car into pedestrians before stabbing worshippers at the Heaton Park Hebrew congregation, a synagogue in Higher Crumpsall, a suburb of Manchester, North West England. 3 people were killed, including the perpetrator, who was shot dead by police. 3 others, including a security guard, were injured and in hospital. The incident was declared a terrorist attack later that day and 3 people were arrested. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year in Judaism. Of course, the attacks in Israel 2 years ago were on this, close enough to this date, the 7th of October, so this one was on the 2nd. For followers, it is a day centred around atonement and repentance, with full fasting and asceticism accompanied by extended prayer services and the confession of sins. British Jews have raised concerns about increased vandalism at synagogues and anti-Semitic comments online and in person due to the ongoing war in Gaza. Jewish security groups, including Community Security Trust, issued warnings earlier in the summer for Jewish people to be vigilant and follow the strict security measures that are in place for communal buildings, events in areas such as locking all doors when not in use, conducting security sweeps and avoiding congregating outside communal buildings. Police were called the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue at 9:31 a.m. British Standard Time on the 2nd of October 2025. 9:31 a.m. So actually it was earlier in the day, after callers reported that a driver had driven into pedestrians and began stabbing people. Manchester police officers quickly declared a major incident and arrived at the scene within 7 minutes, shooting the perpetrator dead at 9:38 a.m. I actually thought this was in the evening, so that's my mistake. Residents local to the area report seeing a man with a knife jump out of a moving car which had been driving recklessly and begin stabbing people. Others saw people on the ground bleeding. Worshippers had gathered for a Yom Kippur service which had begun at 9 a.m. Eyewitnesses inside the synagogue praised Rabbi Daniel Walker for protecting congregants by locking them inside the synagogue and keeping the attacker out before moving them to safety. So that's brave actions by the rabbi there. Firearms officers were deployed at 9:34 a.m. as police received further reports that a security guard had been attacked with a knife. Greater Manchester Police declared a major incident shortly before shots were fired by firearms officers at 9:38 a.m, killing a man believed to be the offender. At 9:37 a.m, Greater Manchester Police initiated Operation Plato, a protocol used in response to suspected terrorist attacks. I suppose that's for Greater Manchester as opposed to the nationwide protocol, but it will be a similar sort of protocol, I would have thought. The incident was formally declared a terrorist attack later that day. Paramedics arrived at 9:41 a.m. and treated 4 members of the public for injuries caused by both the vehicle and stab wounds. Around noon, a bomb disposal unit was deployed to the scene because police believed the perpetrator was wearing a suicide belt. Police said they were unable to confirm whether the perpetrator was deceased until the investigation concluded. Investigators would later state the device was found to be not viable, so it was obviously a decoy to scare people. At 1:23 p.m, a loud controlled explosion was reported. The noise was later confirmed to be from the police gaining access to the perpetrator's car. Police presence was increased at every synagogue in the Greater Manchester area in the immediate aftermath of the attack. Manchester, along with London and Gateshead, is one of the main centres of Judaism in the UK. 3 people were confirmed dead following the attack, including the male perpetrator who was shot by police. Police confirmed that the 2 male victims were Jewish. Police also said that 3 people were seriously injured and remained in hospital in a serious condition. One has a stab wound, one was hit by the car, and a third has an injury which may be caused when police stopped the attacker. So let's hope they pull through and there's no more deaths. The perpetrator was identified as Jihad al-Shami, 1990 to 2025, a 35-year-old British national who was born in Syria, so he must have got British citizenship. Entered the United Kingdom as a young child and became a British citizen in 2006. At the time of the attack, Shami resided in the Langley Crescent area of Prestwich, located 2 miles from the synagogue. Al-Shami was not part of the British counter-terrorism programme that tries to identify people at risk of being radicalised. I'm sure they'll be pouring over social media right about now. The national head of counter-terrorist policing announced the attack was being treated as a terrorist incident and that 3 people other than the assailant had been arrested in 2 separate areas. 2 men in their 30s in Crumpsall and a woman in her 60s in Prestwich were all arrested in suspicion of the commission, preparation and instigation of terrorism following the attack. Prime Minister Keir... Okay, someone's already trying to jeopardise this. They've written Prime Minister Keir Stormtrooper. Yeah, very smart. Later announced at a press conference that the attacker targeted fake Jews because they are Khazars, and that the United Kingdom must have... Yeah, someone's clearly manipulated this post. I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to go to reactions here. Prime Minister Keir Starmer returned from a European political community leaders meeting in Copenhagen, Denmark, to chair a corporate emergency meeting. He stated that extra police assets would be deployed to synagogues across the country due to the attack. The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood echoed this, saying the government will do whatever is required to keep our Jewish community safe. Mayor of London Sadiq Khan likewise announced there would be a stepping up of patrols in Jewish communities and synagogues across London by the Metropolitan Police. Mayor of Greater Manchester Andy Burnham commended the quick response of Greater Manchester Police and raised concerns about the fear and sadness caused by the attack, saying the city would not allow division in our communities. Members of the royal family offered thoughts and prayers and praised the swift actions of emergency services. Netanyahu, of course, has weighed into it and blamed what he calls the enabling of terrorism, blatant and rampant anti-Semitic and anti-Israel sentiment. So Netanyahu, of course, is tying the 2 together. I'm going to come back to that point because it's important. Amnesty International UK expressed sadness over the events, calling it a horrific act of violence that's taken the lives of 2 innocent people and injured many more. British Christian and Muslim community leaders condemned the attack and offered prayers and support to the Jewish community in the UK, to the Jewish people in the UK. Hours after the synagogue attack, the Telegraph interviewed marchers in the city centre, a previously arranged demonstration for the intercepted Global Samud flotilla. Some were apathetic. One marcher said, "I don't give an F UCK about the Jewish community right now. I thought about it and I'm sorry about what happened, but the whole story on why we're here is because of what happened yesterday with the flotilla." Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. I just want to read out the whole thing for the context. I hope there's not going to be any more such incidents, and it's right that security has stepped up at Jewish institutions across the country. It's sad that it's come to that. It's sad that they feel now under threat, or not now under threat. For a long time now, the Jewish community has felt under threat. But I will say this for the record. I was looking at, of course, Reform's condemned it. All the parties have condemned it. Labour's condemned it. And there were ostensibly Reform Party activists coming onto the Labour page, and instead of just, thinking of the victims, they were already trying to score partisan points. They were already trying to jump on this and absurdly blame the government's recognition of Palestine as somehow being behind this. And Netanyahu, of course, is doing the same thing. This atrocity in Manchester doesn't change a thing about Israel's killing of civilians in Gaza. And it shouldn't be taboo to say that. It should be absolutely compatible to condemn a terrorist attack in the UK against the Jewish community, whilst also condemning what Israel is doing. And the problem with this atrocity, aside from the fact that 2 innocent people have been killed in cold blood in their place of worship on a holy day, which is utterly contemptible, is the fact that, frankly, the political right are going to exploit this right now, just like they did after the murder of Charlie Kirk. They're going to exploit this to try and silence all criticism of Israel. Mark my words, that's what they're going to do. They're going to say that because the government's recognised Palestine, as has most of the world, that somehow that has enabled this terrorist. There's going to be a lot of things as to why this terrorist done what he done. I'm sure his supporters will cite what's happening in Gaza. You don't just, you don't get any moral high ground against the state of Israel by killing civilians. This wasn't aimed at the Israeli army. This wasn't aimed at Netanyahu. This was just Jewish worshippers in a synagogue in Manchester. So that's an absolutely grotesque approach. This wasn't even aimed at the Israeli embassy, and I wouldn't condone it if it was either. But, we're talking about an attack on a place of worship on the holy day. It would be like attacking a mosque on Ramadan, or a church during Easter. But already you can see these people trying to score political points. I'm talking about right-wingers who are trying to score political points. The Daily Telegraph had a big glaring headline today saying Israel blames Starmer for the attack. That's absurd. The person to blame for the attack is the terrorist responsible. I mean, if you're going to blame the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for a terrorist attack in the United Kingdom, then if there is anti-Semitic attacks in other countries, then blame every leader who's recognised Palestine. This is an absolutely absurd proposition. Remember, there's Jewish groups who believe in the two-state solution. So I condemn the attack, but I have a big problem with those who are already jumping on this, trying to exploit it. It's actually very cynical and manipulative, actually. Now, of course, British Jews are going to feel vulnerable, and that's why it's right that patrols are stepped up. Anti-Semitism, genuine anti-Semitism, needs to be tackled. I've always condemned it. I've always condemned anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I personally feel uncomfortable when I hear it, when I see people start going on about Jewish control around the world and all the rest of it. It's abhorrent. But I also frankly think it's abhorrent to exploit this atrocity to try and silence legitimate debate, to try and silence legitimate criticism of Israel's excesses, what it is doing every single day. Thousands of children have been killed. Now, if you think that people should just be silent about that because there has been an attack on the Jewish community here, that's absolutely absurd. So it's a troubling development. Troubling because the Jewish community is going to feel under threat. Troubling because it will increase societal tensions. And troubling because it will be exploited. Absolutely, it will be exploited. And of course there'll be Islamists out there trying to condone it. They'll say, oh well, it's justified because of the murder of civilians in Gaza. It's not justified. This wasn't an attack on soldiers. It wasn't an attack on Netanyahu. It was an attack on a synagogue. I mean, think of Jewish people who oppose what the Israeli government's doing. This sort of thing is only going to polarise them. So I absolutely condemn it. The attacker's obviously been killed, but he will have had contacts. There'll be others, and I hope that Greater Manchester Police, I'm sure they will, be working overdrive to find these connections. Once again, we see a terrorist attack, and the security services seem to have had their eyes off the ball on this. It's abhorrent, but I do think it's also abhorrent that there's right-wingers already trying to exploit this. The idea that Keir Starmer is responsible for what this Islamist terrorist done is absolutely absurd. Although I would say one thing to the left, Islamic extremism is a reality. And, if you're trying to silence criticism of that, that's just as bad as right-wing Zionists who try to silence criticism of Israel by using anti-Semitism to do so. I think we have to call out extremism and violence in all its forms when it's against civilians. That's just a no-brainer. So yeah, absolutely I condemn this attack, and I can understand why some Jewish people would maybe feel that the government's policies in criticising Israel has somehow contributed to this, but I just disagree with that, because this is the actions of a terrorist. Recognising Palestine is something that is not what Hamas wants. Why? Because Hamas is against the two-state solution. So I've said before, I think the only reason Hamas is cheering for it is because they think it will bring divisions and, turn Israel's traditional allies against it. But in the long run, it is not what Hamas wants. So that's a distortion, actually, this idea that it's what Hamas wants. But there is another thing to be said here. We've seen 2 innocent people killed. It's awful for their families. But every single day, we're seeing dozens of civilians killed. And a lot of the people who are coming out now and attacking the government, they don't give a damn about those innocent civilians killed. So I do think it's a bit morally hypocritical. Why? Because it was in the UK. I mean, what about the attack in Israel not long ago when 6 Israelis were killed? Is this only because it's in the UK that it's... I really have a problem with the likes of the Daily Telegraph and Reform and others who just don't give a damn about dead Palestinian children. And the implication is that Palestinian civilians are worth less than Israeli civilians. That's a reality. So, I don't know what else will come from this. Hopefully there won't be any more attacks. I hope those who are injured pull through. But it goes without saying, my thoughts go out to the Jewish community, because they are going to be scared right now. Any visible Jew, any Jewish person wearing a kippah is going to feel that they're vulnerable. And there has been examples of anti-Semitic hatred in our society. There was a young Jewish guy going to a synagogue in London shortly after the attacks on October the 7th, and he was pelted by stones. And there's been other such examples. I have personally heard anti-Semitism. I find it repulsive. I hate it. I hate that sort of, those anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But mark my words, the right are going to use this. They're going to exploit it to try and silence criticism of Israel and try and force the government to change its direction in terms of criticising Israel. I think that would be a very big mistake. I don't think the government should change directions. Netanyahu is a war criminal. Netanyahu has the blood of thousands of Palestinian civilians on his hands. Doesn't change a thing regarding what's happening in Gaza. But what does show is that we have a problem with Islamic extremism in this country, and this terrorist atrocity should be condemned by all decent people. But I'm troubled by people talking about this in black and white terms, like, for example, saying Starmer can't be on both sides. What's that supposed to mean? He's condemning a terrorist atrocity, and he's condemning the deaths of civilians in Gaza. I don't see any contradiction there. In both cases, you have innocent civilians killed. So how is that, taking one side over the other? Unless you have a very sort of sociopathic mindset that an Islamist terrorist somehow is the same as Palestinian children. Because again, it's that dehumanization of Palestinians, that they're all one and the same as Hamas terrorists or Islamist terrorists. So that's my honest thoughts on this. Hopefully I won't be censored. So, as if it wasn't glaringly obvious, I condemn this unreservedly. No caveat, in terms of condemning it. But I do say that it is glaringly obvious also that there's right-wingers that are going to exploit this, and I find that repugnant. Exploiting a tragedy to score political points as they are doing in this sense. I mean, those people interviewed at the rally by the Daily Telegraph, it's cherry picking. The Daily Telegraph isn't going to interview many, many, many people who are critical of Israel and will also condemn this attack. Because the Daily Telegraph, the whole coverage of this has been it's been abysmal as far as I'm concerned. I'm talking about the coverage of the situation in Gaza. It's abysmal. it's 100% biased towards Israel. And, they're trying to say, oh, look at the heartlessness of the pro-Palestinians. They don't care about innocent Jewish people being killed. But they're cherry picking. They're not going to talk to people who are critical of Israel and will also condemn this attack. So it's manipulative, actually. And with that being said, I'm going out now to get papers on this story.